stressful time was when I started out growing the company and getting more staff. You have this fear in the back of your mind as you're growing the company, this fear of, will I have enough work for the guys next week? And so you're always thinking to yourself, will it dry up?
Welcome to another episode of Here We Grow. Today, I'm super excited to have my buddy Mason LaFramboise on. I will get into your intro in a second, but I don't know how much you know about this podcast, but the whole goal of it has been to have, people that are have that growth mindset. We've had entrepreneurs, realtors, business owners, and people who have that kind of expansion mindset. Not settling for less, right? Because I believe that if you're not growing, you're dying, and it's not magic, it's motion. So the people that, will not settle for less, which obviously is you. I actually did a little bit of research on you. So a couple of stats about this guy. 2021 Young Entrepreneur of the Year. That's pretty cool. Yeah. You're going to be embarrassed because I got all your stats here. 2019 Consumer Choice General Contractor. You've built 3 successful companies. You're an avid investor. Your social media game is insane, especially for a construction company, right? And you're a serial entrepreneur, obviously, right? So I want to get into your story in a second, but the one question that I wanted to ask you today was, so I heard a quote recently, if your present isn't where you want it to be, your future probably isn't big enough. So in a world where we live with a lot of people, a lot of complacency, which I think is kind of a swear word, what pushes you to constantly do more? And I'll go a little step further than that. Because in building businesses, the goal of every investor and every business owner is to create passive income. At some point, you don't want to be the one who is, pushing the papers or, drilling the screws or whatever it is, right? So you've built businesses to the point where you've had systems and you have processes so that you are I'm assuming that you're hands off, and that's your passive income. But you've made the decision to go back and create active income where you're, putting your feet on the ground and trying to build another business. So what pushes you to do more, and what keeps that future big enough for you?
I guess I've always kind of been the idea that I didn't really want to work. So I always told people I'm kind of lazy. Yeah. But which is kind of a good. So my motivation has always been I've always wanted to just be relaxed and not do anything. Mm-hmm. But I always find that in my life, if I don't have a challenge, I get bored really fast. Right. And if I don't have a challenge, I've always said I always talk to my mom about stuff, and I'm always if I just took a job somewhere else, maybe I'd be more content. She's like, no, you wouldn't. No. I was like, yeah, you're right. You know me pretty well. Yeah.
I think some of the best entrepreneurs are truthfully lazy because at the end of the day, that's what you're going for. You have to work hard. One of my favorite quotes is, you have to do what other people aren't willing to do now so you can live like no one else can later. Right. And obviously that's what you've done. So let's give you a little bit of your background and your story, which you kind of ran me through the other day, which is kind of cool. Where did this whole thing start? And then we'll get into kind of the companies that you run and stuff now.
Okay. I always kind of feel like when I started a business or did anything, it was just based out of, hey, there's an opportunity. Why don't we take it? Right. And it was never really this is the idea and this is my vision. It just kind of turned into the vision. So with the construction business, which was the first business, what I did was I worked for 2 companies in the summer, and I did a co-op through school. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what, let's just try this. Let's try starting a construction company. My buddy had done a lawn care company in the summer before, and he did the summer company grant, and it's from Kedco in Kingston. So they give you $3,000. And I was like, well, worst case scenario, I get $3,000. Right. Best case scenario, something goes well. And so by the end of the summer, I had 18 clients, and I did really well my first summer. And then the next few years, I went off to Queens for commerce. And during my summers, I did the construction company. One summer, I actually went and worked at a corporate job. And I was just I didn't like how slow things moved. Right. I wanted to make the decisions. I remember thinking to myself, I could just tell my boss what to do, but he'd make better decisions. Right. But so then me being young and ambitious and thinking I knew everything at the time. Right. So anyways, then so at the last year of school, I actually took out a loan and I bought a house, and I said, you know what, I want to renovate this house. I'm going to get into real estate. Because at that summer job, I actually had a lot of time on my hands, so I read books on real estate. That's what I wanted to be, is in real estate investments. And so I was like, okay, so I actually bought that house. And then what I did is I rezoned that house to the city and I made it into a legal secondary suite. At the time, those didn't exist really. So I was kind of like the first secondary suite guy. And so what it was is essentially I took a 4-bedroom house and I made it into a a 4 and a 1 bachelor at the back. It was actually a 1 bedroom at the back.
Right.
And when I was doing that renovation, actually, I remember starting it and not really realizing. My dad said, that foundation in the back looks kind of funny. And I remember saying, oh, like, it's probably fine. I'm like, I feel like in my whole life, I've always kind of been like, when I was starting, it was all rose colored glasses. Everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be good. Everything's going to be okay. And I remember when I started the renovation, we pulled the floor up and we look at the foundation and you see, oh, this is like a small little chicken coop addition. This on the backside of this house. It was probably, I don't know, just under 1,000 square feet. And this is where I was going to put the bachelor or the 1 bedroom unit. And so I go and I find that there's no floor, there's no foundation, and it's sitting on dirt, and then there's a few cinder blocks. I'm like, oh, shoot. So I actually had to rip that portion of the house down and rebuild the whole thing.
Holy.
And so it became from a small job to a really big job. A quick, like, summer job turned into the whole summer just taking over. Mm-hmm. So then after that, things actually turned out pretty well. I did a lot of work myself. And ironically, at the same time, I actually had got Lyme disease that summer. I got really sick. I was actually so bad, I was wheelchair bound.
Oh my gosh.
So actually, my mom came into my rescue and kind of helped me run the job all through the summer.
Wow.
But so it was really like, it was a little bit disheartening because you're having to rely on someone else to help you get to where you want to go.
Right.
But it kind of opened my eyes to, you know what, I could probably delegate a lot of my roles out, a lot of my tasks out. Right. And but at the end of the summer, I went back to the bank and said, okay, here's your money. I've paid you off. I want to go do this again. And they said, oh, you don't have enough cash flow to do this again. You have good cash flow from this property, but you need more wealth or more recurring income to do that. I'm like, well, How do I do that? Well, let's start a construction company full blown. Right. And so from 2017, I had like no employees. And then at my peak, we had about 50 employees. And I'd say we're hovering around 35 to 40. That kind of fluctuates right now. Wow. And we've actually have less employees now than we did before. We do a lot more work than we did before because we're relying more on subcontractors. It's just so hard to find workers right now in the current environment.
Right. So cut. What did where did I even? I got so many questions. I think I'll go to the real estate thing first. So like, what pushed you? You say you started reading, real estate books and stuff like that. What pushed you to invest in real estate at what seems like a young age? Because you seem like a pretty young dude right now, as it is, right? And we're talking years ago. So, what pushed you to do that? And also, like, what did figuring that out look like? Because I know I've been in this business and watched a lot of people do a lot of things, and I've watched a lot of people make a lot of mistakes because of lack of education. And I've learned a lot along the way too. So, what pushed you to take that dive? Because it can be intimidating. It's a lot of money. And it doesn't matter what you're buying in real estate, it's a lot of money, right?
Well, I remember the real estate's actually a little bit, in my mind, a lot safer because it's like you can calculate everything. It's a bit more calculated. Yep. Say on the risk scale, it's like a 5. I remember my most stressful time was when I started out growing the company and getting more staff, because you have this fear in the back of your mind as you're growing the company, this fear of, will I have enough work for the guys next week? Right. And so you're going, will I have enough work? And so you're always thinking to yourself, oh shoot, like so then you go, yeah, well, I have lots of work lined up, but I go, will it dry up? Will the work dry up? And so you have that. I feel like every person has that when they're like, a small time contractor, that next step phase is hard to get to that next step. Mm-hmm. And so I remember when you're hiring more people on, you're going, oh shoot, I got to make sure that we have more work for next week. And so you're kind of in this mindset of not getting the profitable jobs. You're in this mindset at the beginning of just getting the jobs. Yeah. And so it's like, that's a kind of a stressful time. So it's a little, for the risk standpoint though, that was very stressful. Yeah. But, I don't know what really gave me my family's pretty entrepreneurial. Like I've grown up in like a business. I think I take a lot of that, business standpoint, like my father's in the car business. He'd come home every day and he'd talk about business every day. And at the table, I talk about employees, how he dealt with them, what he did with them, and stuff like that. And I would just take it for granted how much knowledge he passed on. Right. And so I think I had like 10 years on everyone else from when I started out, because I had all of that experience and knowledge from my father that I just kind of got. And probably would be the same for you too.
I was just thinking a lot of similarities, right? Where you don't really think that learning those types of things is just kind of life growing up. But, hearing those types of stories, because there's a lot of difficult decisions that you have to make. So that's the other question I was going to actually ask you too, is like, coming through with those rose-colored glasses, which I think is really important. Like you need to, like, I like the term I use is blindly optimistic. Like you have to just be blindly optimistic no matter what's going on. That for me, it's like, I'm going to keep this deal together. Like it is falling apart. I'm giving it CPR, whatever. Like, the deal's not going to happen. I have to be optimistic until the time where it's like, a complete failure. And it's the same thing with, growing a business, I'm sure. So do you feel like you still have that after, starting 3 businesses and,
I wouldn't say I have the optimism, but I would say that I've learned a lot of lessons, a lot of good lessons, a lot of hard lessons, a lot of lessons that I always say I've been saying, a lot of people said, I wish the last 5 years could have been my last 5 years in school. And then I could have taken this 5 years and learned. And so I started young and I've learned all these really good lessons, good life lessons, good business lessons. But I wish I could have learned them without having the financial burden of those lessons. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, it's been really good. And I'm like way better for it now. But it's like, a little bit painful going through that stuff.
Absolutely. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
Yeah. They call it growing pains. And I guess that's the pain part of it.
Absolutely. So, okay, so the other thing I want to ask you about too, and this kind of leads into what you were talking about of growing your company to 50 employees, scaling it back to 35. So another quote that I really liked, recently was the road is full of flat squirrels of indecision. So I think in business you need to be able to make decisions and make decisions quickly, and like you literally just said, like sometimes those decisions are very difficult, right? Hiring, firing, the word decide means to kill something off. So when you were building this, and then, I think building it is one thing, but I think scaling it back and trying to make sure that it's, a well-oiled machine must have been actually probably the harder part, right? How have you found those decisions and, of cutting people or adding people? Do you find you're quick to make decisions? What's that process look for you? How do you know when it's the right one?
It's hard. It's really challenging. And a lot of times you're like, when you're cutting people, sometimes they're your friends. They're kind of like your work family. Yeah. And so it is really difficult to do that. And it's not an easy thing to do. And I do it. I hate doing it. It's like kind of when I was younger. I always use like my brother and I as a good example is my brother kind of like has a hot temper. So he's like we were always, when we'd fight in fights, he would be quick to fighting. I remember actually, I was a little bit more strategic with my fighting, I'd say, with him. Right. Like one time we were in the car and he was we were fighting, and I saw my mom coming, so I just stopped and I just took all the punches.
Classic. Are you the younger brother?
Yeah.
That's a classic. I'm an older brother, so that's a classic younger brother move.
And he would go, but he was fighting too. Yeah. Well, you finished it. Right. And that was the phrase that I always get tossed around. But so I was a bit more strategic with that. But I would say like I don't like doing it, and I don't like having to decide, especially decide someone's future. Yeah. Because you're killing off part of them, but you're killing off part of you too. Yeah. And so like, but the hardest thing is getting the metrics on every person and figuring out what their inputs are. Yeah. And so if you can do that properly, and if you can. And I don't do it properly every time. But if you can do it properly, get all the inputs, all the metrics that they are inputting in the system, and you can go back and say, hey, this isn't enough, you need to do more. And you can constantly be warning them until it's very obvious at the end of the day that, okay, I'm going to be fired tomorrow if I don't do this today. Mm-hmm. And so they're not like shocked. They're like, I understand. But it's so hard to get to that point sometimes because
it's got to be difficult with that many employees too. Like at one point being at 50 employees, how are you keeping metrics on that many people, right?
Oh, it's almost
like I've got one employee. It's very easy. Like, right?
Yeah. I guess like for that standpoint, you're relying on your staff. You basically like I had like a COO come in a little while ago, and it was actually kind of good because it was almost like it was a year of consulting though, right. And it was really good though because he kind of came in, he diagnosed the whole company, and they left. And but what he did, which I really liked, which I thought was kind of it was really good learning for me, was when he came in, he sat down all the employees and he individually every week would meet with them all the time. And then from there, he would train all the managers to train the staff below. Mm-hmm. And so he would getting reports from those staff to those staff. And so you don't actually have to go physically watch them to monitor them, but you have to create barometers of metrics for success for your managers to follow. So if they're hitting their goals, that means that their staff below them are hitting their goals.
And you have to have the right managers, I imagine, right?
Huge. Yeah. So it's like and it's hard. Like what we do with the construction, at least, is we create like these construction schedules, and we basically say, hey, you're on track with your schedule, you're behind your schedule. What's happening? Or you're ahead of schedule. Great. You're ahead of schedule. I don't really doesn't really bother me.
Does that ever happen in construction or what?
We've been actually way better at it.
At LaFramboise Construction, it does. They are ahead of schedule. There's a plug.
Just recently.
Yeah.
But we've basically learned that, if you, I found that like when you start subbing things out, it's nice because they can kind of keep the schedules, and you can ask the subs exactly what the schedule they're going to keep, and they usually keep that schedule.
Right.
But not always do the subs keep the schedule because they've taken on so much work that they're so busy, and so they can't always keep their schedule too. So it's like a little bit.
It's a balancing act. Yeah. So back to the decisions and the thing that we haven't talked about, because we talked about the construction company, but starting, where does the decision come for, and I know like kind of where, because you've talked to me about it before, but where does the decision come to start new companies? Talk about the companies that you're trying to bring on now and how that kind of happened.
I would say like majority of decisions to start a new company has just been out of like an opportunity base. It's just been like, hey, like there's a good opportunity. I don't know. Like, it's funny. We're having a baby in October.
Congratulations.
And thanks. And my wife was like, we should get, there's no maternity clothes. We should like almost start like a maternity clothes business.
Right.
And I was like, I don't have any desire to do that anymore. But, a few years ago, I'd probably be like, I want to do that.
Right.
But I feel like right now I have enough work to keep me busy that I'm not.
So that was going to be my next question, because you must have felt like that when you started the new companies as well, right? Like you saw a need for it. I see needs for stuff every day, but I'm like, I know the amount of effort that it would take to do that, because I know what it took to start my own, business and get it to where it's at. And I still feel like, I'm sure you would feel the same way, but I wake up every day wondering how I could do more just in the one business that I have. Right. I think the other cool thing is, your businesses are perfectly parallel. They complement each other like to a T, right? Yeah. So I think maybe, does that help that they're kind of in the same lane? Cause that's, if you're going to, what you just talked about, like, maternity stuff, that's a total different lane, right? Like that's going the other way, whereas everything else is kind of construction based, right? Did that help when you're starting those companies, or?
Yeah, I'd say so. I would say it's still like with the store, we kind of got lucky and inherited some staff from another store. So that was really helpful. And it was like there was a ton of process and procedures in there. And I actually have like very little to do with the store on a day-to-day basis, if not almost nothing. That's
ideal.
Yeah, it's great. The store basically runs itself, and I almost don't even have contact with the store that much. Because the team is really good there. They're really set. They're basically a store. Like I basically just got a store almost for free. Right. Not completely. There has been nothing's for free. Yeah. There's a lot of process procedures you got to build, a lot of infrastructure you got to build. So it's still always a challenge. There's a lot of just simple softwares you got to get to that you don't even think about. So
talk about like how much, I don't know how much you can lean into it, but like with what you have going on, I have written on my board in my office, one of my many boards, systems equal success and systems equal scalability. So you can't really scale a business without a system. I also believe that, you don't need more money, you need more people, but that means the right people and, effective people, which we just kind of talked about. So, what kind of systems do you have in place for your different companies to make sure that, because I think the other thing about, having a system, we talk about this when we list properties for sale, we have a system from the second that we sign the paperwork every single step of the way until the sold signs up. And the reason that we do that is because we want to avoid speed bumps, because before we had this dialed in system, there was room for error, right? And there always is, like, people make mistakes, but, what kind of systems do you have in place to make sure that, you guys stay on track and, like we talked about, having those metrics for keeping those metrics on people?
We have a lot of systems, actually, like a ton. We have a bunch of different, there's like a safety system. We have the job tracking and costing system. We have there's the mechanisms like contracts and change orders and stuff that you put in place to make sure you don't miss anything. A lot of it, though, not unfortunately, but it's not a set fast computer system that you can build to put in place. We're actually looking at implementing like a software that just you put all of the data and all the job files and everything in. We've like built out like internally like a server system where everything goes in. So let's just say the ideal system is that, and we kind of built it so far, is let's just say one of our employees gets hit by a bus. The next day, someone could come in and take over. And
right, so that's the hardest thing.
So we have that kind of built out right now, which is good. But
so that's just tracking everything that they do in their job and coming up with some way to train the next person on that role?
Yeah, so basically we have like a big server with all the jobs in the server. And you have, in every single job, you have every file that's attributed to that job. So if the plans change, you update the plans. If the change order, you put it in that job. If the contract changes for some reason, you put it in that file.
Right.
And so anyone that has access to that can get access to that all the time. So everyone, instead of saving it on their computer, which actually we used to do, everyone save it on their individual computers. We all save it in one server, one drive.
Right.
And I remember thinking at the beginning, going, servers and drives are kind of old school. They don't really make sense. And now I'm going, why did I not do that earlier?
Right.
But it's just those things you don't know until you know.
Yeah. And it can be, I mean, I've found too, every time for us, we go to a lot of real estate conferences. Every time I go to a friggin' real estate conference, I come back, I'm like, we need to implement this system. And it's always a big project. It's going to save you time, down the road, but it can be a project, right? So obviously you've done a lot. In your years in the business, what do you see as kind of the next 3 to 5 years of your life and your businesses? What's kind of the forecast? Do you have any kind of monstrous goals or ambitions for that?
I guess for the businesses, I'm kind of a little bit done with like the growing. I kind of feel like the businesses are kind of at like a spot where they're like they don't need to grow as much. Like we do about 8 to 10 homes a year,
right?
Which is a lot, and we could do more. But we do like a bunch of renovations and a bunch of additions, stuff like that too. On top of that, and then the store is probably, I would say the store could get more commercial clients because we actually have like a really like strong commercial team where they have like this, like they have all these products that they just know, all the staff just knows commercially, and so it's kind of unique there. It's kind of interesting. I was talking to someone about what's happening in the next 5 years in the market. Right. And no one knows. Obviously, it's all guesses. But it's interesting in Quebec right now because apparently this is what one of the owners of a company operating in Quebec said. He said that in 2023 and on, for the next 5 years after 2023, they're not doing any construction or commercial projects that aren't necessary, but the government isn't. And so all those government bids are just not happening for the next 5 years. And the reason is because material cost escalation. So let's say they have a project that's 30 million and by the end of it, it's 60 million. And they're like, what happened? Well, the materials went up. The labor went up. All these escalations went up. And so they're getting fed up in Quebec. So the plan is they're going to put a halt to that for the next 5 years. And so that owner, he has like a bunch of companies. And he said, we went through this once before with a different type of company, but he's selling a bunch of equipment. He's selling a bunch of his, or he's laying a bunch of staff off there. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, it's kind of there's potential bad, but there's potential good at that. Because every problem, there's usually an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking, well, the potential good for that is that you're going to have more skilled trades come to Ontario, potentially. Yeah. The other potential is that the negative of that, though, is you might have more contractors come to Ontario. Right. But I don't know. I don't see it being as like a huge threat for the Kingston area because Kingston is just so steady all the time. But for myself, what I want to do is what I've been trying to do is get some property. I'm renting right now for my office space and I want to actually buy an office space and then I want to chop it up and rent it out. Right. And I kind of feel like, I always said like it's like not really like you don't really want to hide your plans per se because it's like at the end of the day like it doesn't really matter what your vision is. Like anyone can come up with the next great invention, but it's how you implement that invention. Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah. And so it's all about like implementation of it. So what I always want to do is and there's kind of a need for this too, is I wanted to buy a building where you chop it up and you create some warehousing space and office space above, and then you could rent that out to like cleaning companies, service-based companies, all these different companies. Because I feel like that's kind of what the companies that need those rental spots. Mm. And in Kingston, I've noticed that it's hard to find a rental spot, like my drywaller. He's been looking for like a year and a half now to get a rental property that's not too big, just that's decently priced to rent out. But he's like, I just can't find that space because there's not. It's difficult, and there's not like the location's not good or whatever. So I'm like, oh, if I could just solve that need for him and a few other people, then I could live in the building, rent free.
100%.
And then do that or do that again or do something else. I would love to get into 24 units or more. That would be great.
Right.
But again, like these are all dreams and hopes and aspirations.
You got to keep them big though, right? If you're, what did I say at the beginning? If your present isn't where you want it to be, your future isn't big enough. But dude, you said something that I believe in so much is I find a lot of people nowadays, and again, back to these real estate conferences, I was just at one. That's why it's so fresh in my mind. But you hear a lot of people talk about, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And if it wasn't for this, whatever. And it's like, we'll just go do it then. And I say to everybody that, when we bring our team to these events, it's like, it's good to go rah, we're going to do this, we're going to do all this crazy stuff. But I would say probably 5% of agents that go to these conferences come back and actually implement what they're saying they're going to, or what they learned, right? Implementation is everything, right? It's one thing to come up with because you can overanalyze when we talk about systems and stuff like that. You can overanalyze your systems and overanalyze everything that you do. But if you're not actually putting your head to the ground and grinding or trying to work towards that goal, you'll never get there, right? So, because exactly, I feel like a lot of people talk a mean game, but what are you going to actually do to implement it, right? So.
Yeah, it's hard to do that.
So that's, I think that's a lot of info from you today. Do you want to throw a quick plug out to kind of your companies that we can throw out at the end, so that if anybody is looking to build a home or obviously like you said for your materials and stuff like that, just talk about those companies really quickly and where people can find you, and then we'll wrap things up here.
Yeah, so I guess we're kind of all located on LaFromboise is located on Gardeners Road, and Cornerstone's located on Justice. We're actually across. There's like a big contracting hub.
Give a quick 2-second intro on what Cornerstone is and what they offer.
Okay, so Cornerstone original intent and kind of still the same is basically have all the custom materials all one place. And so instead of driving around town and finding all your materials at 10 different stores, you can do it all in one spot. So it's kind of a unique opportunity because Kingston doesn't really have that per se. And so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of Cornerstone. And then at LaFromboise, we kind of do a variety of things, but we specialize mainly in custom homes and custom renovations and stuff like that. And we do a little bit of commercial work too. We've been doing we did some big additions and some heritage work downtown, and we're doing some lease outfits and stuff like that. So yeah, we kind of, a bunch of different things we can do, but we kind of specialize in a few.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on, dude. You fit the bill of this, here we grow mentality to a T, and obviously being the serial entrepreneur that you are and wanted to strive for growth. Congratulations on the baby on the way. Yeah, and I can't wait to see what you do moving forward, my man.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks for coming on. And then as we wrap up every episode, here we grow.